One of the most important but difficult parts of chess is winning a one game. When you go up material early, it can be tempting to want to try and win the game as fast as possible, but that's not always the best strategy. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through 3 kind of checklist items that you can use when you find yourself in a winning position to make sure that you actually win that game. And I'll be using positions from my own games from a recent over-the-board classical tournament, so they're not some crazy grandmaster games, they're like regular, down-to-earth, normal people chess. These are the kind of positions that you're going to have to convert if you want to become a stronger chess player. So let's get into it. So we're starting off with the concept of simplification. And as you can see, this is a very simple position, and it's kind of like the bare bones of what simplification means. When you go up a piece early in the game, like a full piece, like imagine that black didn't even have a bishop here, that we're just up like a rook. That means that when there are still pieces on the board, if your opponent ever offers you an equal exchange of pieces, like a knight for a knight or a bishop for a bishop, most of the time you're going to want to take that trade because eventually you want to trade down into an endgame like this, and if you have an extra piece and your opponent doesn't, it's going to be a lot easier to win the game. Now, of course, everything depends on your specific situation and your specific position, but in general, when you're up material, you want to simplify, you want to trade down. But a lot of times trading down leads to positions like this one, where we are just up in exchange. There are 2 pawns left on the board, 1 for each side, and surprisingly, these endgames are not always that easy to convert. Like, just being up in exchange, especially when there's still pawns on the board, like, you have to be very careful. But in this exact position, my opponent played this move, bishop c6, and now if you'd like, you can pause the video and see if you can find the winning plan in this position. All right, so of course, since our concept is to simplify, we want to simplify by trading our rook for our opponent's bishop. But it's not that simple. You need to calculate if this is actually going to work. So the idea is that after rook a6, the bishop is pinned to the king, so it cannot move. So after this, my opponent moved their king down, and we are now able to take this bishop. The question is, do we actually want to give back the exchange? Is this endgame winning for us? And it is, because we are going to get this diagonal opposition after we take, king takes, and we are able to take black's last pawn. So my opponent played king d6, I played king d4, king e6, king e4, and just continuing to follow them, keeping that opposition. They step in front of the pawn, I'm still keeping that opposition, and now, I mean, there has been a few ways to win, but I decided at this moment it was time. I can start pushing the pawn. My opponent moved back. Now they have the opposition, but I have another waiting move, pushing that pawn to f5. And now once they move out of the way, I'm able to take control of this promotion square, and the pawn's going to run. There's no way to stop it. My opponent resigned. But I hope you recognize that you need to know this position. You need to know this exact concept of opposition in order to know all the way back here that this is a good trade, rook for bishop, right? If you can simplify into what you know for sure to be a winning endgame, one that you can basically play out in your sleep, this is how you got to win these games. So now we are looking at this position. We have the black pieces, and this is a game I played against a good friend of mine and a mentor who I think just got a little bit too excited about, plans over on the king side and didn't realize that my knights would get so active. So in this position, if you'd like to pause the video and find the tactic, this is like the point where it became winning. Go ahead and pause now. And we're back. The move is knight e4, and it's completely trapping the queen. This knight is covering these 2 squares, this knight is covering this square, and the bishop is covering this square. So the queen has nowhere to go. The only move here is to sack the bishop, and once I take it, that square is now vacated for the queen, and here is our actual position we're going to talk about. So we're not completely out of the woods yet. My knights are kind of in a weird spot. My king is not castled, and this pawn is under attack. That would come with a check on the king. All of these things are what I was thinking about. When we're talking about simplification, that doesn't mean giving the material back that you have won. So, if we were to lose a minor piece back, that's not what we want out of simplification. That's not what that means. We want to keep our material advantage, but we want to make equal trades of pieces if at all possible. So that brings us to our next concept, which is defensive moves, right? So what is white threatening in this position? Well, white is threatening to push d3, which would be an attack on our knight, and it would also be attacking the other knight, which is currently loose. And again, we're still looking at this b5 pawn that is loose as well. So even though I was up a piece at this point, I was very nervous about this position because my king was still in the center and my pieces were not exactly safe, or they didn't feel that way. And I knew that even if I moved the knight back like to d4 or something, and this trade was allowed, white would still be able to win this b5 pawn. And again, my pieces are just like not quite as safe as I would like them to be. I want to continue the momentum moving forward for myself, even as I'm making defensive moves. So according to the computer, there are a bunch of good moves in this position, but the one that I chose that I felt was continuing the attacking momentum forward while also, preparing for a defensive move was queen b6. And you might immediately think, well, how does that stop the d3 threat? Well, the reason it stops it is that we are actually making a pawn push threat of our own, because once our c pawn moves forward, then we're going to be attacking the king. That's going to be a check. And that's actually exactly what happened in the game. So my opponent played d3, I played c4, and this is a check, and we're also attacking this pawn. So we're going to get rid of this pawn, and then we will be able to save the knight. All right, so the king moved out of the way, I captured on d3, white took back, and I've got just enough time to move that knight back, attacking the queen and also defending this pawn on d5. White decided to develop a piece, also creating like a counterattack on my queen. And again, this concept of simplification, I'm like, sure, let's trade bishops. I would love to simplify. So we did. Now the queen moves and the game continues. But I do want to show you another moment right here where we're talking about simplification again. So when you're down material, so like if you're white in this position, you're just trying to make as many threats as possible. You want to checkmate the king before your opponent has the chance to simplify down to a winning endgame, right? So bringing all of the pieces over here and anticipating bringing the queen over as well, which would, have this sort of x-ray attack on my rook and also attacking this square. And so I just didn't want to deal with any of that. So I gave back the exchange. My opponent had sacked an exchange to make some of this happen. And I'm like, that's fine. Let's do that. Let's get rid of all the threats, play g6, get rid of any back rank threats as well. And finally, I'm able to start moving my pieces up. Those knights really put in some work for me. And a few moves later, the game ended in this position, which is a mate in 10, apparently. We didn't play out the mate in 10. Which brings us to this position, which is actually not from a game that I won. This is a game I played in the last round of this tournament. I was on board 1. I was playing against a master, and I had the white pieces in this position. So we're going to look at it from the other side. We're going to try and beat Kamryn, which is not that difficult when Kamryn is playing like this. So first of all, this is the point where it became winning. I allowed a tactic, so you can go ahead and pause the video and find the best move for black in this position to get a winning position. All right, so our winning move in this position is knight b4. This is a beautiful move. It has a ton of threats. First of all, if the pawn takes, this bishop is also hanging, but more pressingly, a rook could slide in, and this queen is pinned to the king, and a piece could drop back like this, but the king's safety is not so good. So instead of taking that knight, I decided to defend my loose bishop. So I moved my queen out to a4, but then the knight actually has a check on d3. This bishop can't move back to take it, because then this bishop would take my queen. So I have to move the king, and after bishop takes on b5, queen takes back, the knight has yet another threat. It's not done yet. My rooks are forked. I'm losing an exchange. And I saw this as soon as he played knight b4, and I figured this was my best option, going down an exchange. Even like I said in the first example, it's not necessarily a death sentence. There's still possibilities when you have an equal number of pieces, even if the material itself is not equal. All right, so I took the L, gave up my rook for the knight, and now my plan as white is I want to push these pawns and attack the black king. Unfortunately, even though this pawn structure looks like really weird, the king is actually surprisingly safe in this position. White does not have a lot of good ways to break through. Like if this pawn goes forward, like black can just push this pawn forward. Same with this one, like we just kind of shut things down over there. And then our main concept we're looking at in this game is evaluating the position and figuring out what our strength in the position is, and then continuing to improve and push that strength until it becomes something unstoppable for our opponent to deal with. Still keeping in mind the previous things we talked about: simplification and good defense. The king is very safe right now, and you will see that my opponent does try to simplify, first of all kicking my queen back, and now trying to trade the bishop for the knight. I was having none of that. I moved my knight out of the way. Another key part of this is piece activity, right? So getting all of the pieces involved, getting the rook involved. And this is all leading up to kind of a key moment, which I will ask you again to pause the video. And this is a tough one, but I want you to not necessarily just come up with like one move, but try and think of what Black's plan in this position is. What is their greatest strength in this position? And how can you continue to push that forward, make a plan that will go on, like, in a vague sense, like 10, 15 moves even. So it can be kind of hard sometimes to put these plans into words, or even like the evaluation into words. But the way I would simply describe it is that these pawns in the center can become really nasty if we can create a passed pawn. And that's exactly what Black did. So pushing e5, and you'll notice Black had this plan even when he played rook d8, because he was thinking that after this pawn takes, this pawn would be undefended, right? So needing to defend that pawn was another, aspect of bringing the rooks into the party. But now's the time for e5. He took back with the pawn, and now this is a huge, huge strength. This is a threat, like this is a threat, this is a threat, like all of this is suddenly very pressing for me, and I don't even really have time to start storming on the king side. Maybe a better plan for white here is h5. I ended up playing g5, just thinking that I didn't want, if I played h5, I didn't want this pawn to be able to move forward and just like lock everything up. So g5 first with the intention of eventually playing h5, but there's just no time. e4 comes. I was actually anticipating, like I didn't miss that my pieces were about to get forked. I was anticipating this and I was like, ooh, I'm so smart. I'm going to move back, and this pawn is pinned. It can't capture because then I would get the queen. But then my opponent played bishop e3. And I'm like, all right, I guess we're simplifying because I can't allow this. I'm not giving up another exchange. And my knight's still under attack. My rook's under attack. So I just have to trade the bishop for the knight, which is what happened. Move my queen. I mean, I essentially could have resigned already, but I do like to play out these kind of positions against stronger players just to like get an idea of how they will convert a winning position. Because I mean, honestly, like the best case scenario when you're playing somebody who's 400 points higher than you is that you're going to get a game that you can learn from. And I would like to play that out as long as possible to learn as much as I possibly can from them. So I am not a proponent of resigning too early. I'm a proponent of if we want to play it out till checkmate, like let's go for it. I play it out until there's no possible way, if I'm on the losing side, that there's no possible way that I could win, because there's always a chance. But also it's good to learn. And small rant, like I've had somebody like apologize to me for playing out a position too long, and I'm always like, girl, like you play it out as long as you can. Like I never mind that. If they make me play it out until checkmate, that's totally fine. I should be able at my level to checkmate basically without thinking. It should be a very mindless activity for me. And if they want to get in that practice of like the defensive side of it, that's totally fine. I mean, we're here to play chess. I don't understand why higher level players, like, it's like they don't want to play the game sometimes. You know what I mean? Like they resign way too early sometimes. I don't get it. But anyway, now you can see this plan coming to fruition. My opponent has created this passed pawn, and he's going to push this advantage to a point where my moves are just like impossible to find. So pushing forward with e3, and I have to move my rook again to stop this pawn. Pushing forward with e2, I move my queen back to also try and possibly win the pawn. My opponent gave a check. I move my king in, and now we're kind of riffing at this point. I gave up my knight accidentally. That was not on purpose. And now all the way back to the beginning, this concept of simplification. By the way, finally got my h5 move in, but it's a little bit too late. My opponent captured, and there's just nothing here. But my opponent did probably the most principled thing, which was to force the queen trade. This is a check, and my queen is hanging, so I have to take the queen. I know that my master level opponent is going to win when he is up an entire rook, and so I resigned in this position. So I hope these games help to kind of build up to the full concept of converting a winning position, which is keeping in the back of your mind, you want to simplify when you're up material, and then you also want to keep your defenses active, make sure that you are not giving back any of that material, or that your opponent is not suddenly going to checkmate you out of the middle of nowhere. And then finally, finding the correct plan in the position, taking a breath, right? Figuring out what your advantages in the position and then pushing that forward. And if that advantage is you've got a pawn that can run forward, then you do everything in your power to make that pawn run forward. If the advantage is you have a very strong checkmating attack, then you can go for that. But you have to listen to what the position is actually asking for. You can't just say like, oh, I want to do a fast checkmating attack when the position is not ready for that, because then you're just going to end up losing more material and the game might not end in your favor after all. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and if you like this video, let me know if you'd like to see more kind of content like this down in the comments below, and I'll see you soon.